government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Oil has rebounded several dollars in price on dollar worries, concerns over conflicts worldwide, as well as a hurricane, tropical storm preparing to slam into Florida and key refineries in Mississippi. A year later, Fed faces growing financial storm. This is from CNBC. Merrill Lynch to face legal action for securities sales. They've also moved tens of billions of dollars into a British banking group to avoid billions in taxes. Massive developments on the Russian front dealing with the Caucasus. Peacekeepers to stay in Georgia. That's how the media is spinning it, when all the Russians are planning to do is to leave their original peacekeeping force, slightly augmented, in Ossetia and Abkhazia. Peacekeepers to stay in Georgia, but it's being spun by the Western media that they have broken the ceasefire and are refusing to pull back. If they pull back, Georgian forces will again pour into the areas they've already attempted, somewhat successfully, to ethnically cleanse, going door to door, murdering men, women, and children in the two breakaway republics that have been part of Russia for more than 1,000 years. Continuing, U.S. Gates scoffs at Russia's warnings to Poland over the missile shield and satellite bases they're handing over, as well as the Ukraine. Pentagon Chief Robert Gates dismisses as empty rhetoric Sunday Russian warnings that Moscow would target Poland for a possible military strike because Warsaw agreed to host part of the U.S. missile shield. Pakistani dictator who's been caught in two-staged elections, Musharraf, resigns as president. We'll try to break down that big development that just came in the last few hours. Pakistan's president has resigned to avoid impeachment charges, he told the nation during a televised speech. So see, more happens in a month, in some cases in history, than happens in the previous decade. The psycho Lenin had a good way of saying it, that sometimes in a week more happens than in 100 years, was basically the paraphrase. And notice how so much is happening with the economy and with the militaries and with global balance of power. The tumblers are slipping into place all over the place. This is an amazing time to be alive. Policymakers call this a fluid situation. Normally the societal and global and regional and imperial sociological structures are very rigid in a status quo, but during these periods of radical change, the situation liquefies and is more pliable. That means good men and women. That means people that know the truth about government-sponsored terror and world government, the New World Order, and its crimes. We have a great opportunity now, like never before, to have our voices heard and to shape the future. And the New World Order knows that. They've had to bring in chaos. They've had to liquefy and take out the rigidity of the global structure, which is very dangerous for them. But as political alchemists, they have to do this to then bring in a greater crisis so they can offer the solution, world government, as Zbigniew Brzezinski's doing in Time magazine today, how to deal with Russia, basically a strong global government, bringing them into the family of nations, but only after they're militarily encircled. You see, they have liquefied the political situation, and they want to reform the world in their image, under their grid. We need to go in and challenge them at every level by discrediting them, exposing them, showing up their lies. And we're doing it on the London bombing, on 9/11, on the Iraq invasion, with Iran, on what happened in Russia. They're being caught with their pants down, as it is said. So very important information today. We're going to go over all the financial news, what's happening in the Caucasus, what's happening with Iran, a lot of key police state news as well. Just very important broadcast and some special guests we'll tell you about a little bit later in the show. We're also going to have wide open phones today at 1-800-259-9331.
He's the T-Rex of political talk. Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
On the economic front, big things are happening. You don't need me to tell you that, but we'll get into the specifics and take your phone calls on the economic, military, and societal fronts. 1-800-259-9231. Wide open phones today throughout the full 4 hours, and we have some special guests popping in near the end of the show today. You see, they know the average person is living hand to mouth. The average person worldwide, not just in the West, is thinking about the news in a perspective of day to day. And so they can come out and say, oh, look, oil is dropping, commodities are dropping, the economy's doing great. Meanwhile, we have record bankruptcies, record defaults, homes going into receivership, being repossessed. That's up 55% just in the last quarter. They're now admitting that even with their cooked inflation numbers, that it's double what the Fed had projected at around 6%. It's more like 15, raging unabated. All the market fundamentals say that our economy is in deep, deep recession, bordering in the future on depression. And we've talked a lot about that here, and almost every major financial expert we've talked to, including Nobel Prize winners in economics, have agreed. But the corporate-controlled press basically will give you bad financial news for a month, then give you good financial news for a month, and say, this is the end, we're coming out of it, everything is wonderful, when all of the fundamentals show a worsening economic trend. And then, what does the Federal Reserve, the private banking structure that owns and controls this nation through fraud, what is their answer? More issuance of currency, more issuance of liquidity to themselves, while they tighten up on credit to the general population. And they may have interest rates down at 3%, but real interest rates are going up to 10%. A lot of people are paying 25+%, and that's compounded on credit cards. How long can they keep this facade going? You know, they report that the crash happened in October of 1929, but it really took about a year of the stock market going up and down on the same roller coaster we're seeing now before it finally settled in at the lows that it stayed at for the next few years. And if you look at the market fundamentals and the economic fundamentals and the ratios of debt with private citizens and corporations and governments, local governments, county governments, city governments, state governments, it's at all-time record debt. Meanwhile, they've been taking almost all the tax money at water districts, school districts, cities, counties, states, and putting it into private funds, private investment funds overseas, offshore. They've shored up their assets while leaving us with the bill. A year later, Fed faces growing financial storm. When Federal Reserve officials gathered for their annual Jackson Hole conference last August, Bear Stearns shares were trading at well over $100 apiece. The benchmark federal funds rate was 5.25%, more than double where it stands now, and oil cost $70 a barrel. 12 months later, Bear Stearns is gone, as is about $400 billion from banks. They've put out $400 billion in a single month before. It's well more than that. Ballot sheets. Legendary old oilman T. Boone Pickens thinks the days of oil under $100 a barrel may be gone too. Looking back at 2007, conference provides some cringe-inducing moments. In a speech at the Wyoming Mountain Resort, Fed Chairman Bernanke declared that the central bank was ready to act to shield the economy from the credit crisis, but would not save investors who'd made bad choices. It is not the responsibility of the Federal Reserve, nor would it be appropriate to protect lenders and investors from the consequences of their financial decisions. But he's done that for the banks, not the investors. But said at the time, words that now sound ironic in light of the Fed's role in rescuing Bear Stearns from bankruptcy in March. Now Bernanke is hoping the Fed won't have to act again. And it goes on from there. The Fed hopes it won't have to act again. They are destroying the dollar. All the fundamentals of issuing more liquidity, more currency, helicopter bin is only going to kill the dollar. And they can try to pump it up by saber rattling and global grandstanding to scare the world back into supporting the dollar. But what they give the dollar in support with one hand, they take away with the other. And so much of what we're seeing now was reported on 3 years ago by the Financial Times of London, the true financial paper of record. And they stated there that the elite are going to bring the world into a global recessionary/inflationary depression. And that the only point up for discussion and the only debate is whether the elite, the true financial powers, not the guy who lives in $1 million house down the road from you who you think is rich, but the true billionaires, those that leverage and control trillions, will be whether the global elite can survive an economic implosion and consolidation that they started in motion.